It came from the ridge nearest him. There, on the highest point, stood a tall pine like the one in which he sat. A moment before it had been a gorgeous red in the morning light. Now all the needles flashed and the pine caught fire. Never before had it looked so beautiful. But this was the last time it could exhibit any beauty, for the pine was the first tree on the ridge to burn. It was impossible to tell how the flame had reached it. Had the fire flown on red wings, or crawled along the ground like a snake? It was not easy to say, but there it was at all events. The great pine burned like a birch stem. Ah, look! Now smoke curled up in many places on the ridge. The forest fire was both bird and snake. It could fly in the air over wide stretches, or steal along the ground. The whole ridge was ablaze. There was a hasty flight of birds that circled up through the smoke like big flakes of soot. They flew across the valley and came to the ridge where the boy sat. A horned owl perched beside him, and on a branch just above him a hen hawk alighted. These would have been dangerous neighbours at any other time, but now they did not even glance in his direction, only stared at the fire. Probably they could not make out what was wrong with the forest. A marten ran up the pine to the tip of a branch and looked at the burning heights. Close beside the marten sat a squirrel, but they did not appear to notice each other. Now the fire came rushing down the slope, hissing and roaring like a tornado. Through the smoke one could see the flames dart from tree to tree. Before a branch caught fire, it was first enveloped in a thin veil of smoke. Then all the needles grew red at one time, and it began to crackle and blaze. In the glen below ran a little brook, bordered by elms and small birches. It appeared as if the flames would halt there. Leafy trees are not so ready to take fire as fir trees. The fire did pause as if before a gate that could stop it. It glowed and crackled and tried to leap across the brook to the pine woods on the other side, but could not reach them. For a short time the fire was thus restrained, then it shot a long flame over to the large dry pine that stood on the slope, and this was soon ablaze. The fire had crossed the brook. The heat was so intense that every tree on the mountain was ready to burn. With the roar and rush of the maddest storm and the wildest torrent, the forest fire flew over to the ridge. Then the hawk and the owl rose, and the marten dashed down the tree. In a few seconds more the fire would reach the top of the pine, and the boy, too, would have to be moving. It was not easy to slide down the long, straight pine trunk. He took as firm a hold of it as he could, and slid in long stretches between the knotty branches. Finally he tumbled headlong to the ground. He had no time to find out if he was hurt, only to hurry away. The fire raced down the pine like a raging tempest. The ground under his feet was hot and smouldering. On either side of him ran a lynx and an adder, and right beside the snake fluttered a mother grouse, who was hurrying along with her little downy chicks. When the refugees descended the mountain to the glen, they met people fighting the fire. They had been there for some time, but the boy had been gazing so intently in the direction of the fire that he had not noticed them before. In this glen there was a brook, bordered by a row of leaf trees, and back of these trees the people worked. They felled the fir trees nearest the elms, dipped water from the brook and poured it over the ground, washing away heather and myrtle to prevent the fire from stealing up to the birch brush. They, too, thought only of the fire which was now rushing toward them. The fleeing animals ran in and out among the men's feet without attracting attention. No one struck at the adder or tried to catch the mother grouse as she ran back and forth with her little peeping birdlings. They did not even bother about Thumbietot. In their hands they held great charred pine branches which had dropped into the brook, and it appeared as if they intended to challenge the fire with these weapons. There were not many men, and it was strange to see them stand there ready to fight when all other living creatures were fleeing. As the fire came roaring and rushing down the slope, with its intolerable heat and suffocating smoke, ready to hurl itself over brook and leaf tree wall in order to reach the opposite shore, without having to pause, the people drew back at first, as if unable to withstand it. But they did not flee far before they turned back. The conflagration raged with savage force. Sparks poured like a rain of fire over the leaf trees, and long tongues of flame shot hissingly out from the smoke, as if the forest on the other side were sucking them in. But the leaf tree wall was an obstruction behind which the men worked. When the ground began to smoulder, they brought water in their vessels and dampened it. When the tree became wreathed in smoke, they felled it at once, threw it down and put out the flames. Where the fire crept along the heather, they beat it with the wet pine branches and smothered it. The smoke was so dense that it enveloped everything. One could not possibly see how the battle was going, but it was easy enough to understand that it was a hard fight, and that several times the fire came near penetrating farther. But think! After a while the loud roar of the flames decreased, and the smoke cleared. By that time the leaf trees had lost all their foliage. The ground under them was charred. The faces of the men were blackened by smoke and dripping with sweat. But the forest fire was conquered. It had ceased to flame up. Soft, white smoke crept along the ground, and from it peeped out a lot of black stumps. This was all there was left of the beautiful forest. The boy scrambled up on a rock, so that he might see how the fire had been quenched. But now that the forest was saved, his peril began. The owl and the hawk simultaneously turned their eyes toward him. Just then he heard a familiar voice calling to him. Gorgo, the golden eagle, came sweeping through the forest, and soon the boy was soaring among the clouds, rescued from every peril. End of A Morning in Angermanland. Read by Lars Rolander.